IV Scene 3 is the only scene in the play that takes place outside of Scotland. It takes place in England, and we have followed Macduff to England to meet with Malcolm. And so here, this is actually a pretty important scene in the play because these are our heroes. These are our good guys. The only hope for Scotland lies in the hands of Malcolm and Macduff. So, as we listen to this scene and as you examine the short segments that we looked at in groups, you need to be thinking about, can these two men save the country? That's kind of what we're looking at here. And of course, Macduff has come to try to convince Malcolm to join him in trying to overthrow England. But Malcolm is uncertain. Malcolm has to try to decide if he trusts Macduff because Malcolm ran and hid in he ran and hid in England so that no one in Scotland would try to kill him. So he's a little suspicious and he has to decide if he trusts Macduff.
Let us seek out some desolate shade, and there weep our sad bosoms empty.
Let us rather hold fast the mortal sword, and like good men bestride our downfall and birthdom. Each new morn, new widows howl, new orphans cry, new sorrows strike heaven on the face, that it resounds as if it felt with Scotland and yelled out like syllable of dull.
What I believe I'll wail, what no believe, and what I can redress as I shall find the time to friend, I will. What you have spoke, it may be so, perchance. This tyrant, whose sole name blisters our tongues, was once thought honest. You have loved him well. He hath not touched you yet. I am young, but something you may deserve of him through me, and wisdom to offer up a weak, poor, innocent lamb to appease an angry god.
I am not treacherous.
But Macbeth is. A good and virtuous nature may recoil in an imperial charge. But I shall crave your pardon. That which you are, my thoughts cannot transpose. Angels are bright still, though the brightest fell. Though all things foul would wear the brows of grace, yet grace must still look so.
I have lost my hopes.
Perchance even there where I did find my doubts. Why in that rawness left you wife and child? Those precious motives, those strong knots of love without leave-taking. I pray you, let not my jealousies be your dishonours, but mine own safeties. You may be rightly just, whatever I shall think.
Bleed, poor country. Great tyranny, lay thou thy bases sure, for goodness dare not check thee, where thou thy wrongs. The title is afeard. Fare thee well, lord. I would not be the villain that thou think'st for the whole space that's in the tyrant's grasp on the rich east to boot.
Be not offended. I speak not as in absolute fear of you. I think our country sinks beneath the yoke. It weeps, it bleeds, and each day a new gash is added to her wounds. I think withal there would be hands uplifted in my right, and here from gracious England have I offer of goodly thousands. But for all this, when I shall tread upon the tyrant's head, or wear it on my sword, yet my poor country shall have more vices than it had before, more suffer, and more sundry ways than ever, by him that shall succeed.
Okay, so in the beginning here, Malcolm is expressing his doubts to Macduff. First of all, Malcolm says, "Come, friend, let us sit together and weep." And Macduff says, "No, let's not weep. Let's pick up our swords and go do something about it." And they both mention these sufferings that Scotland has been having: new widows howl, new orphans cry. And Malcolm says, "What I can redress, I will." He says, I will help Scotland. I just have to be careful. The tyrant was once thought honest, and he used to be your friend. Macduff says, "I'm not treacherous. And Malcolm says, but Macbeth is. And then he says, but I'm sorry, but I shall crave your pardon. Angels are bright still, even though the brightest fell. And even though all things foul will sometimes appear fair, fair things must also look so. So he says, I have to figure out whether or not I can trust you. Are you a foul thing that looks fair, or are you really fair? And one thing he does is he questions, why did you leave your wife and child to come here? And Macduff is just so offended. He's like, fine, then I'll just leave. I would rather just leave and do this on my own than have you doubt me and think that I'm a villain. And so then Malcolm says, no, don't be offended. Look, I know that when I come back, there would be hands lifted in my right. I know people will support me, but always look out for the buts. When I tread upon the tyrant's head and wear the tyrant's head on my sword, my poor country will have more vices than it had before by him that shall succeed to the throne, meaning himself. From this point forward, Malcolm puts forth several vices, a vice being a bad habit or a bad character trait that he himself has that would make him a bad king. Let's listen.
What should he be? It is myself, I mean, in whom I know all the particulars of vice, so grafted that when they shall be opened, black Macbeth will seem as pure as snow, and the poor state esteem him as a lamb, being compared with my confineless harms.
Not in the legions of horrid hell can come a devil more damned in evils to top Macbeth.
I grant him bloody, luxurious, avaricious, false, deceitful, sudden, malicious, smacking of every sin that has a name. But there's no bottom, none, in my voluptuousness. Your wives, your daughters, your matrons, and your maids could not fill up the cistern of my lust. And my desire all continent impediments would o'erbear that did oppose my will. Better Macbeth than such an one to reign.
Boundless intemperance in nature is a tyranny. It hath been the untimely emptying of the happy throne and fall of many kings. But fear not yet to take upon you what is yours. You may convey your pleasures in a spacious plenty and yet seem cold. The time you may so hoodwink. We have willing dames enough. There cannot be that vulture in you to devour so many as will to greatness dedicate themselves, finding it so inclined.
With this.
So first, Malcolm says, there's no bottom in my voluptuousness. Not all your wives and daughters could fill up the cistern of my lust. So he says, I'm too lusty. And so then Macduff says, yes, that's true. That has been the undoing of many kings, but don't worry about it. You can convey your pleasures in spacious plenty. We have willing dames enough. Look, there are plenty of women who are going to be willing to be with you because you are the king. So don't worry about that. There are plenty of ladies in Scotland. So then Malcolm mentions a second vice.
There grows in my most ill-composed affection such a staunchless avarice that, were I king, I should cut off the nobles for their lands, desire his jewels and this other's house, and my more having would be as a sauce to make me hunger more, that I should forge quarrels unjust against the good and loyal, destroying them for wealth.
This avarice sticks deeper, grows with more pernicious root than summer seeming lust, and it hath been the sword of our slain kings. Yet do not fear. Scotland hath foisons to fill up your will of your mere own. All these are portable with other graces we.
But
so then Malcolm says, I'm too greedy. I would take land from this guy and steal the jewels from that one. There's no end to my greed. And Macduff says, yeah, that's worse than being lusty. But look, Scotland has an abundance. You'll be fine. There's plenty of wealth to grow around. And these vices we can get over if you have other graces.
I have none. The king becoming graces as justice, verity, temperance, stableness, bounty, perseverance, mercy, lowliness, devotion, patience, courage, fortitude. I have no relish of them, but abound in the division of each several crime, acting in many ways. Nay, had I power, I should pour the sweet milk of concord into hell, uproar the universal peace, confound all unity on earth.
Scotland. Scotland.
If such a one be fit to govern, speak. I am as I have spoken.
Fit to govern? No, not to live! Oh, nation miserable, with an untitled tyrant bloody sceptred. When shalt thou see thy wholesome days again, since that the truest issue of thy throne by his own interdiction stands accursed, and does blaspheme his breed? Thy royal father was a most sainted king. The queen that bore thee, oftener upon her knees than on her feet, died every day she lived. Fare thee well. These evils thou repeatest upon thyself have banished me from Scotland. Oh, my breast, thy hope ends here.
All right. So the final thing that he says, first of all, he lists all these king becoming graces: justice, verity, temperance, perseverance, mercy, patience. He says, these are all the things a king should be. He says, I don't have any of those traits. I'm none of those things. In fact, I'm the opposite of all of those things. Then, as his one last vice, he says, if I had power, I would pour the sweet milk of concord into hell, uproar the universal peace, and confound all unity on earth. Basically meaning he would destroy any peace, and the opposite of peace is war. He would be a warlike king and destroy peace. And that is the last straw for Macduff. Macduff, oh, Scotland, Scotland. Malcolm says, so if I'm fit to govern, just let me know. If you want a king like me. And Macduff says, fit to govern? No, not fit to live. And then he starts going on, oh, Scotland, Scotland, what will become of you? And he's like, how could you be this way, Malcolm? Your royal father was a saintly king. You know, and he's, oh, Scotland, my hope for you ends here. And at this point, Malcolm interrupts to explain what is going on. And he kind of throws the whole thing on his head and says, I was actually lying to you just now. And he explains why.
This noble passion, child of integrity, hath from my soul wiped the black scruples, reconciled my thoughts to thy good truth and honour. Devilish Macbeth, by many of these trains, hath sought to win me into his power, and modest wisdom plucks me from over credulous haste. But God above deal between thee and me. For even now I put myself to thy direction and unspeak mine own detraction. Here abjure the taints and blames I laid upon myself for strangers to my nature. I am yet unknown to woman. Never was forsworn. Scarcely have coveted what was mine own. At no time broke my faith, would not betray the devil to his fellow, and delight no less in truth than life. My first false speaking was this upon myself. What I am truly is thine and my poor country's to command. Whether indeed, before thy here approach, old Seward, with 10,000 warlike men already at a point, was setting forth. Now we'll together, and the chance of goodness be like our warranted quarrel. Why are you silent?
Such welcome and unwelcome things at once 'tis hard to reconcile.
Strangers to my...
So he says, okay, I was just testing you. And now I'm reconciled to your truth and honor. Now that I know that you wouldn't drag me back to Scotland no matter what I said, I know that you're here on Scotland's behalf and not Macbeth's. Because if Macduff had just said, sure, that's fine, let's go. Sure, that's fine, just come on back to Scotland with me. No matter what Malcolm said, then Malcolm would have known that it was a trap, that Macduff was just trying to get him back into Scotland so Macbeth could capture him. But since Macduff is willing to walk away, since Macduff is willing to say, okay, never mind, you're no good for Scotland and I don't need you, now Malcolm knows that Macduff has Scotland's best interest at heart, and so he is willing to trust him. And so now Malcolm says, I have to unspeak my own detractions. I have abjured myself. He says, I laid these taints and blames on myself, but they were lies. I've been lying to you. And so then he goes into, first of all, let's just review. He said that he was lusty, greedy, and warlike. So now he replies, in fact, I am yet unknown to woman. So let's make this clear. These are the lies. The truth is that he is a virgin. So that's quite the opposite of being lusty. He says he was never forsworn. He has never told a lie. In fact, he goes on to say his first false speaking was this upon myself. The first lie I ever told was when I told you all those lies just now. He says, I scarcely have coveted what was my own. So he is the opposite of greedy. He doesn't even enjoy his own possessions. And he has at no time broken his faith. He is trustworthy, meaning that he'll keep treaties, which is the opposite of saying he would break them apart. And then he goes on to say, in fact, I've already talked to old Seward and he's already raising an army of 10,000 men. And so Macduff has just been standing there this whole time. Malcolm says, why are you silent? Macduff says, such welcome and unwelcome things at once are hard to reconcile. It's like, I'm just confused. What? I'm just confused. And I think we can sympathize with that. All right, so I am going to skip past some of this stuff with a doctor because this is kind of this long section about where they talk about Edward I, and it's just a bunch of inside jokes with England. But what we do need is now Ross has come to deliver a message.
Their melody.
See, far a most miraculous work in this good king.
To know itself, it cannot be called our mother but our grave, where nothing but who knows nothing has once seemed to smile, where sighs and groans and shrieks that rent the air are made.
All right, so Ross has shown up now, and Macduff said, how is Scotland doing? And so Ross is giving a listing of how Scotland is doing. He says, the poor country cannot be called our mother but our grave. He says, there are sighs and groans and shrieks that rend the air.
Not marked, where violent sorrow seems a modern ecstasy. The dead man's knell is there, scarce asked for who, and good men's lives expire before the flowers in their caps, dying or ere they sicken.
Too nice and yet too true.
What's the newest grief?
That of an hour's age doth hiss the speaker. Each minute teems a new one.
How does my wife?
Why, well,
I want to pause here for just a minute because Ross knows how Macduff's wife is. Last time we saw Ross was talking to Lady Macduff, and it's true that he did leave her before she was murdered, but he knows what has happened to Lady Macduff and the children. In fact, he has come to England specifically to tell Macduff what happened to his wife and children, but he puts it off. He can't share the news. And I've seen this performed several different ways by actors and actresses. But the general idea here is that Ross just doesn't want to be the bearer of bad news. And so he's kind of putting it off. He says these things like, they were at peace when I did leave them, which could either mean, at peace, meaning they've gone to heaven, or at peace, meaning, when he left, there's a technicality. Last time he saw him, they were alive. But he is just putting off the bad news.
And all my children?
well, too.
The tyrant has not battered at their peace.
No, they were well at peace when I did leave them.
Be not unniggard of your speech. How goes?
When I came hither to transport the tidings which I have heavily borne, there ran a rumour of many worthy fellows that were out, which was to my belief witness the rather, for that I saw the tyrant's power afoot. Now is the time of help. Your eye in Scotland would create soldiers, make our women fight to doff their dire distresses.
Be it their comfort, we are coming thither. Gracious England hath lent us good seaward and 10,000 men, an older and a better soldier none that Christendom gives out.
Would I could answer this comfort with the like, but I have words that would be howled out in the desert air, where hearing should not latch them.
What concern thee? The general cause, or is it a fee grief due to some single breast?
No mind that's honest, but in it shares some woe, though the main part pertains to you alone.
If it be mine, keep it not from me. Quickly, let me have it.
Let not your ears despise my tongue forever, which shall possess them with the heaviest sound that ever yet they had.
I guess at it.
Your castle is surprised, your wife and babes savagely slaughtered, to relate the manner where, on the quarry of these murdered deer, to add the death of you.
Merciful heaven! What man! Ne'er pull your hat upon your brows. Give sorrow words. The grief that does not speak whispers the o'erfraught heart and bids it break.
My children too.
Wife, children, servants, all that could be found.
And I must be from thence. My wife killed too.
I have said.
Be comforted. Let's make us medicines of our great revenge to cure this deadly grief.
He has no children. All my pretty ones. Did you say all? Oh, hell, kite. All? What? All my pretty chickens and their dam in one fell swoop.
Dispute it like a man.
I shall do so. But I must also feel it as a man. I cannot but remember such things well that were most precious to me. Did heaven look on and would not take their part? Sinful Macduff! They were all struck for thee. Not that I am. Not for their own demerits, but for mine fell slaughter on their souls. Heaven rest them now.
Be this the whetstone of your sword. Let grief convert to anger. Blunt not the heart. Enrage it.
Oh, I could play the woman with mine eyes and braggart with my tongue. But, gentle heavens, cut short all intermission. Front to front bring thou this fiend of Scotland and myself. Within my sword's length set him. If he escape, heaven forgive him too.
This tune goes manly. Come go we to the king. Our power is ready. Our lack is nothing but our leave. Macbeth is ripe for shaking. And the powers above put on their instruments. Receive what cheer you may. The night is long that never finds the day.
So once Ross manages to deliver the news, and Macduff, you can hear his heart breaking. But Malcolm says, let us make medicines of our great revenge. He says, dispute it like a man. Let this be the whetstone of your sword. Let grief convert to anger. So he says, let's fight back. He has now very personally attacked you the same way that the whole country has been suffering. Now you need to go take your revenge. And Macduff says, first of all, he says, sinful Macduff, they were all struck for thee. They were not struck for their own demerits, but for mine. So he blames himself because he knows Macbeth attacked his family because he couldn't attack Macduff himself. And then he says, I just pray that this fiend of Scotland and myself will come together at a sword's length. And so here then, at the end of Act 4, as we stand on the edge of the very last act of the play, we have an army of 10,000 led by Malcolm and Macduff, ready to move into Scotland to try to take on the tyrant. And Macduff is armed with vengeance.